People desire what they cannot easily have. It's a fundamental truth of human nature, deeply wired into our psychology. When something is rare, when something is hard to obtain, we naturally assign it more value. Think about the way people rush to buy limited edition items. How an exclusive club with a waiting list suddenly becomes more desirable. Or how people place higher importance on something they fear losing. The principle applies everywhere, but nowhere is it more powerful than in human relationships. When you make yourself constantly available to someone, when you prioritize them above everything else, you unknowingly send a message. I am always here. You don't have to work for my attention. And just like that, your presence becomes routine. What is always available becomes easy to take for granted. Think about the air we breathe. It's essential to life, yet we rarely stop to appreciate it because it's always there. Now imagine if oxygen were suddenly limited. People would panic, fight for it, do anything to secure it. That same psychological response exists in relationships. In the beginning, attraction is often fueled by the unknown. It's the unpredictability, the challenge, the feeling of discovery that keeps someone intrigued. But as soon as something becomes overly accessible, it loses its allure. That's why so many relationships start off exciting, full of passion, only to fizzle out when one person starts giving too much, while the other sits back and receives without effort. The more you give without requiring effort in return, the less the other person values it. It's not that kindness or generosity are wrong. It's that excess availability without perceived value leads to complacency. If you drop everything for someone at a moment's notice, if you constantly check in, if you rearrange your schedule to accommodate theirs, you are unintentionally lowering your worth in their eyes. Not because they are cruel or ungrateful, but because they no longer have to earn your attention. There is no chase, no challenge, no sense of urgency. This is why people often feel confused when someone they were deeply invested in suddenly starts pulling away. The moment you stop calling as often, the moment you stop texting first, the moment you start focusing on yourself instead of them, that's when their perception of you shifts. They start to notice your absence. They start to wonder why your energy is no longer directed at them. And more importantly, they start to feel that they might be losing something they once took for granted. Consider this. When a high-status individual, whether it's in business, social circles, or relationships, walks into a room, they do not beg for attention. They command it effortlessly. Their presence alone creates curiosity. They don't need to over-explain, over-give, or chase approval. Why? Because their perceived value is high. They understand that when something appears scarce, people instinctively want it more. This is why successful people do not waste time convincing others of their worth. They know their energy is valuable. They know their time is precious. And because of that self-awareness, others are drawn to them. The same applies in relationships. The person who is constantly chasing, constantly proving, constantly giving without boundaries becomes easy to ignore. But the one who is selective with their energy, the one who does not rush to be validated, the one who remains a bit unpredictable, that is the person who naturally attracts attention and respect. When you start prioritizing yourself over someone who has been taking you for granted, the shift is immediate. The very thing they once dismissed now becomes important. It's as if a switch flips in their mind. They start to wonder why you aren't as available, why your energy is no longer centered around them, why you seem occupied with other things. That curiosity breeds attraction. There is nothing manipulative about this. It's simply how human psychology works. We chase what seems just out of reach. We are drawn to what we feel we haven't completely secured. It's why brands create waiting lists for luxury items. It's why people suddenly become interested in something the moment they feel it might be slipping away. When you make yourself less accessible, when you stop giving without limits, when you let someone feel the impact of your absence, they start to realize just how much they actually value your presence. But here's the key: you must genuinely embody this shift. It cannot be an act. If you pull away with the intention of making someone chase you, but still sit around waiting for them to react, you are still emotionally dependent on them. The real power comes when you no longer need their validation at all. When you become so invested in your own growth, your own success, and your own happiness, that their attention becomes a secondary thought, not a primary need. That's when the dynamic changes completely. That's when you move from being the one who seeks validation to being the one who receives it effortlessly. People often misunderstand what truly creates attraction and respect in relationships. They think that by giving more, proving themselves, and always being available, they will be valued. But in reality, the more you chase someone's attention, the less valuable you appear to them. This happens because the human mind is wired to seek challenge and uncertainty. When something is too easy to obtain, it loses its significance. Emotional dependence is one of the fastest ways to push someone away. It creates an imbalance where one person is constantly seeking approval while the other person takes on the role of the decision maker. The moment you make someone your emotional center, constantly needing their validation, constantly checking for their responses, constantly adjusting your mood based on how they treat you, you give away your personal power. And the truth is, people do not respect what is weak. They do not admire what is desperate. They do not feel drawn to something that appears too readily available. This is why people who are emotionally independent seem to have a magnetic presence. They do not beg for attention because they do not need it to feel complete. Their sense of self-worth is not tied to how another person treats them. They move through life with confidence because they are not waiting for someone else to determine their happiness. And the ironic part, the less they seek validation, the more they receive it. Think about the times when someone was deeply interested in you and you weren't fully invested. You didn't overthink your responses. You didn't anxiously wait for their messages. You didn't need their attention to feel good about yourself. And because you weren't dependent on them emotionally, you had a natural sense of confidence. That confidence made you attractive. But the moment you started to care too much, the moment you started overanalyzing every interaction, the moment you started basing your emotions on their behavior, something changed. Suddenly you felt insecure, you felt anxious, and instead of acting like the confident person they were drawn to, you started acting like someone who needed their approval, and that shift pushed them away. People are naturally drawn to those who exude self-assurance. They are intrigued by those who do not seek permission to be happy. When you depend on someone else emotionally, you give them control over your feelings. If they respond warmly, you feel good. If they ignore you, you feel anxious. Your emotions become a roller coaster dictated by another person's behavior. That is a dangerous place to be because it makes you powerless. But when you detach from emotional dependence, everything changes. You no longer react impulsively when someone pulls away. You no longer panic when they don't respond immediately. You no longer let someone else's actions dictate your mood. Instead, you operate from a place of inner security. You know that your happiness does not depend on them. You know that their attention is a privilege, not a necessity. And when you embody that mindset, you naturally command more respect. People start to sense that they cannot control you emotionally. They start to feel that they are not the center of your world. And this creates a powerful shift. Instead of you being the one chasing, they start to wonder about you. They start to question why you are so unaffected. They start to feel the urge to prove themselves to you. The power dynamic reverses. When someone knows they have complete control over you, they take you for granted. They know that no matter how they treat you, you will always be there. They know that they do not have to earn your attention because you will give it freely. But when you remove that certainty, when you show them that you are perfectly fine with or without them, they begin to see you differently. They realize that your presence is not guaranteed, and human nature makes us value what we feel we might lose. This is not about playing games. This is about shifting your mindset so that your emotions are no longer dictated by external factors. It is about creating a life where your happiness does not depend on whether someone chooses you or not. When you operate from that place of confidence, everything shifts in your favor. You no longer waste time overthinking. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself. You no longer fear losing someone because you know that you are the prize. And when you truly embrace that, people cannot help but be drawn to you. The human mind craves excitement, mystery, and unpredictability. It is drawn to what feels just out of reach, to what requires effort to attain. When something is too easy to access, it becomes ordinary. And what is ordinary is often overlooked. This is why relationships that start with passion and excitement sometimes fade into indifference. Because what was once thrilling becomes predictable. The moment someone feels like they have fully secured you without any effort, they subconsciously stop valuing your presence in the same way. People desire what they are unsure of. When they have to work to earn your attention, they cherish it more. But when you are always available, always responding immediately, always making them your priority, they start to assume that they do not have to put in any effort. It's not that they don't care. It's that human nature makes us place higher value on things that require investment. When someone has to earn something, they take pride in it. They become more committed to keeping it because they remember the effort they had to put in to get it. But when something is handed to them freely, without any challenge, it loses its significance. Consider the way people treat exclusive opportunities. A limited edition product, an invitation to an elite event, or an opportunity that is not available to everyone, immediately becomes more desirable. People instinctively want what is rare, what is not given out easily, what feels like a privilege to have. Relationships work the same way. The moment you stop being easily accessible, the moment you make someone work for your attention, the moment you become a little less predictable, their perception of you changes. They start to feel that you are someone they need to invest in rather than someone they can take for granted. This does not mean being distant or playing mind games. It means understanding the value of scarcity. It means knowing that if you are always available, if you always say yes, if you always respond instantly, the other person never has to wonder about you. They never have to question where they stand with you. And when someone never has to question, they start to assume. They assume you will always be there. They assume they do not need to put in extra effort. And as soon as they assume they have secured your place in their life, the excitement fades. When you stop making yourself so available, something interesting happens. The other person starts to notice your absence. They start to feel the difference when you are not always the first to text, when you are not always waiting for their call, when you have other things going on in your life that do not revolve around them. And because they are no longer certain about where they stand with you, their mind starts to work in a different way. Instead of assuming they have you, they start to think about how to keep you. The shift in their behavior is not because they suddenly realize something new about you. It's because human nature makes people value what they fear losing. When something is always present, it blends into the background. But the moment it starts to disappear, the moment it is not so easily available, it becomes the center of attention. It becomes something they want to secure before it is too late. This is why emotional detachment can be so powerful. When you stop needing someone's attention, when you stop giving without limits, when you focus on yourself instead of them, they naturally become more drawn to you. They feel the shift in your energy. They recognize that you are no longer chasing, no longer waiting, no longer available on demand. And instead of you being the one worrying about where they are, they start wondering about you. They start to feel that they are no longer in complete control of the situation, and that feeling creates urgency. It is not about manipulation. It is about understanding the reality of how human attraction works. The more someone has to work for something, the more they want it. The more uncertain they are about where they stand, the more effort they put into secure it. If you remove that uncertainty, if you make everything too easy, too available, too predictable, they do not feel the need to invest. But the moment they sense that they might be losing something valuable, they become focused on keeping it. There is a reason why the most confident, self-assured people never chase. They do not need to. Their energy, their presence, their ability to hold their own space naturally draws people in. They are not constantly trying to prove their worth or beg for attention. They understand that their time and energy are valuable, and because they believe that, others believe it too. When you start to act from that place, when you stop making yourself an option that is always available, you will notice the dynamic shift. The attention you used to give so freely will now be something others work to receive. People often fail to realize that the more they pour into someone who does not reciprocate, the more they diminish their own value. When you prioritize someone who does not prioritize you, you communicate one simple truth. You are willing to accept less than you deserve. And when you accept less, people give you less. They start to believe that you do not require effort, that you do not expect respect, that you will always be there no matter how they treat you. This is how the cycle of emotional neglect begins. When one person gives endlessly and the other person takes without appreciation. It is in human nature to test boundaries, even unconsciously. People will always push to see how much they can get away with if they realize that no matter how they behave, you remain the same, always available, always waiting, always forgiving, without consequence. They will not see any reason to change. They will assume that your presence in their life is guaranteed, that your affection is unconditional, even in the absence of respect. And once someone believes they can have you without putting in effort, the dynamic of the relationship shifts permanently. This is why self-respect is non-negotiable. It is not about making someone jealous or trying to manipulate their emotions. It is about setting a standard for how you expect to be treated. People learn how to treat you based on what you allow. If you constantly overextend yourself for someone who barely acknowledges your efforts, you are teaching them that they do not need to prioritize you. You are showing them that no matter what they do, you will always be there, waiting, hoping, giving. But the moment you withdraw that energy, the moment you step back and focus on yourself, everything changes. When you start valuing yourself more, others have no choice but to do the same. When you stop proving your worth and instead let your presence or absence speak for itself, you shift the power dynamic. Instead of you being the one seeking validation, the other person starts to question why they are no longer receiving your attention so easily. They begin to wonder if they miscalculated, if they underestimated you, if they took something for granted that was never meant to be given without effort. And once that doubt enters their mind, their entire approach toward you shifts. People value what they earn. It is a psychological truth that when something requires effort, it becomes more meaningful. When someone has to work for your attention, they appreciate it more. They do not take it lightly because they know it is not something that is given freely to just anyone. But when they do not have to work for it, When they know that no matter what happens, you will always be there, they start to devalue your presence. It is not always intentional. It is simply how human nature works. This is why the most attractive people are not the ones who try the hardest to impress others. They are the ones who know their own worth. They do not chase. They do not overextend. They do not lower their standards to keep someone interested. And because they have that level of self-respect, people naturally gravitate toward them. Their energy commands attention without them having to beg for it. When you pull back and stop giving so much to someone who does not reciprocate, you create space for them to reflect. They start to feel your absence. They start to realize that they are no longer receiving the same level of attention, effort, and care that they once did. And in that space, they begin to question their own role in the relationship. Were they too complacent? Did they assume too much? Did they overlook something valuable? This self-reflection is what prompts change. It is important to understand that this is not about punishment. It is not about playing games. It is about self-respect. It is about recognizing that if someone truly values you, they will not need to be reminded to treat you well. They will not take your presence for granted. They will not assume that they can give you the bare minimum and still expect you to stay. And if they do, then they were never meant to be in your life in the first place. Too many people make the mistake of thinking that if they just give more, if they just prove themselves a little harder, if they just show the other person how much they care, they will eventually be appreciated. But appreciation does not come from overgiving. It comes from knowing when to step back. It comes from understanding that sometimes the best way to make someone see your value is to let them feel what life is like without you constantly prioritizing them. When you stop making someone who gives you little feel like they are your whole world, they start to notice. They start to feel the difference. They start to understand that your attention was never owed to them. It was a privilege. And once they realize that, they either rise to meet your standard or they fade away. Either way, you win. Because you are no longer spending your energy trying to convince someone to see your worth. Instead, you are standing firm in the knowledge that your worth was never in question to begin with. People are naturally drawn to those who maintain a sense of independence and mystery. When you make someone the center of your world, when you revolve your life around them, when you are always readily available, you eliminate any sense of intrigue. There is nothing left for them to wonder about, nothing for them to discover. And as much as people crave connection, they also crave the excitement of pursuit. They want to feel like they are earning something valuable, not being handed it on a silver platter without any effort. The moment you make someone the priority of your existence, you begin to lose a part of yourself. Your passions, your personal goals, your individuality start to fade into the background. You stop focusing on your own development because you are too consumed with their opinions, their actions, their validation. And what happens next is almost always the same. The person you are prioritizing starts to sense this imbalance. They start to realize that your happiness, your mood, your entire emotional state revolves around them. And instead of this making them feel flattered, it makes them feel pressured. No one wants to be responsible for another person's entire sense of self-worth. No one wants to feel like they are the only source of happiness in someone's life. It is a burden, not a privilege. And once they sense that you have made them the center of your universe, they start to pull away. Not necessarily because they do not care about you, but because something within them begins to shift. They no longer feel the excitement they once did. They no longer feel the need to pursue you, to earn your attention, to invest effort. They already have you without condition, without challenge, without question. This is why the most attractive people are the ones who have a life beyond their relationship. They are the ones who have ambitions, hobbies, goals, dreams that exist outside of anyone else's approval. They do not make their entire world about one person because they understand that doing so only leads to disappointment. When you have your own passions, your own interests, your own sense of purpose, you naturally create an energy that is magnetic. People are drawn to you not because you are chasing them, but because you are chasing something bigger than them. Your own growth, your own fulfillment, your own success. The biggest mistake people make in relationships is abandoning themselves. They forget who they were before they met this person. They forget the things they loved, the dreams they had, the independence they once enjoyed. They become so focused on maintaining the relationship that they stop maintaining their own personal journey. And the irony is, this is the very thing that makes the other person lose interest. Because what drew them in the first place was your uniqueness, your individuality, your sense of purpose. When that disappears, so does their attraction. This does not mean being distant or unavailable just for the sake of it. It means genuinely cultivating a life that excites you with or without them. It means rediscovering the things that make you feel alive, the things that inspire you, the things that set your soul on fire. When you are passionate about your own journey, you do not need to chase anyone. You do not need to beg for attention. You become someone that people want to be around because your energy is vibrant, fulfilled, self-sustaining. Think about the people who command attention without even trying. They are not the ones constantly seeking approval. They are not the ones adjusting their entire life around someone else. They are the ones who walk with confidence because they know who they are, because they are secure in their own path, and because they are secure in themselves, others are naturally drawn to them. When you make someone feel like they are your only source of happiness, you unknowingly push them away. But when you make them feel like you are happy, fulfilled, and whole, with or without them, you create a powerful shift. They start to realize that your presence in their life is a choice, not a necessity. They start to see that you are not dependent on them for validation, that you have your own sense of purpose beyond them. And this realization makes them want to be part of your world even more. Independence is one of the most attractive qualities a person can have. When you do not need someone, but you choose to have them in your life, it creates a completely different dynamic. It creates a relationship built on respect, admiration, and mutual desire, not obligation or emotional dependency. People want to be with those who inspire them, who challenge them, who bring something valuable into their life. And the only way to truly be that person is to first become someone who is whole on their own. The most successful relationships are not built on need. They are built on two people who are already complete within themselves, who come together not because they are looking for someone to fill a void, but because they genuinely enjoy each other's presence. The more you invest in yourself, the more attractive you become, not just to one person, but to the world, because people respect those who respect themselves. They admire those who have a clear vision, a strong sense of identity, and a life that is meaningful beyond just a relationship. When you shift your focus from seeking attention to building yourself up, everything changes. You no longer feel the need to chase anyone because you realize that your value does not decrease based on someone else's perception. You become the kind of person who naturally commands respect, who does not settle for less than they deserve, who walks away from anything that does not align with their worth. And in doing so, you create an energy that makes people want to be part of your journey, not because you need them, but because your presence is something they do not want to lose. When you pull back your attention, you create a space that was once filled with your energy, your time, and your effort. That space becomes undeniable, impossible to ignore. The absence of your presence is often more powerful than your presence itself. Because when someone is used to your constant availability, they start to take it for granted. They stop appreciating it. They assume it will always be there no matter what they do. But when that energy is withdrawn, when you stop making them a priority, when you no longer center your world around them, a shift occurs. They begin to notice. They begin to wonder. They begin to question why the attention they once received effortlessly is no longer coming their way. And in that moment, their perception of you changes entirely. People do not value what they believe they have unlimited access to. It is human nature to overlook what feels guaranteed. When someone knows you will always respond, always be there, always be available, they stop feeling the need to reciprocate. They stop putting in effort. They stop appreciating your presence, because to them it is expected rather than earned. But when you step back, when you choose to prioritize yourself instead, you disrupt that expectation. You show them that your presence is not something to be assumed. It is something that must be valued. When you are always the one initiating, always the one reaching out, always the one putting in effort, you communicate that the relationship or connection is more important to you than it is to them. And the moment that imbalance is established, the power shifts. The person on the receiving end begins to believe they hold all the control. They know that no matter how much or how little they give, you will continue to be present. That knowledge makes them comfortable, too comfortable. But the second you stop giving that energy, the comfort turns into discomfort. They start to wonder why. They start to notice the change. They start to feel a void where once there was constant reassurance. This is when the chase begins. Because people only chase what they feel they might lose. When someone realizes they no longer have your undivided attention, they start to crave it. They start to miss the security they once had. They start to question their own role in the situation. Did they take you for granted? Did they miscalculate your importance? Did they assume they could put in minimal effort and still keep you? That doubt, that uncertainty, that realization that you are no longer within easy reach, it triggers something deep within them. It makes them want to prove themselves. It makes them want to regain what they once had. But the key to making this work is not pretending to be unavailable. It is not about playing games or manipulating emotions. It is about genuinely shifting your focus away from them and onto yourself. It is about truly recognizing your own worth and refusing to give your time and energy to someone who does not fully appreciate it. Because when you pull back in a forced or insincere way, the effect does not last. But when you pull back because you have genuinely realized that your life, your happiness, and your self-worth do not depend on them, the energy changes entirely. You stop seeking, you stop chasing, you stop overextending. And when you do that, they feel it. They feel the difference. People are drawn to confidence. They are drawn to those who do not need them but choose them. When you make someone feel like your entire happiness is dependent on their validation, they feel suffocated. But when you show them that you are perfectly happy and whole with or without them, they suddenly feel compelled to prove their worth to you. They want to matter to you. They want to regain the position they once had in your life. And that is the secret. People do not want to be needed. They want to be desired. They want to feel like they bring value to your life, not like they are the sole source of it. The moment you shift your energy from seeking to attracting, everything changes. Instead of looking for ways to make them notice you, you start to focus on yourself. You invest in your personal growth. You dive into your own goals, your own passions, your own happiness. You become so fulfilled within yourself that their absence no longer affects you the way it once did. And that is when they notice you the most. That is when they feel the impact of your presence or lack thereof. Because people remember the ones who made them feel something, and nothing is more powerful than the realization that someone they once took for granted is now out of reach. It forces them to confront their own actions. It makes them evaluate what they did to create this distance. And in that reflection, they often come to a stark realization they had something valuable, and they let it slip through their fingers. That fear of loss, that sense of missing out on something irreplaceable is what drives them to chase. But here is the most important part. When they do come back, when they start to chase, you must remember why you pulled away in the first place. You must remember that your worth is not defined by their attention. You must remember that your happiness is not contingent upon their validation. Because when you truly internalize that, you no longer operate from a place of fear. You no longer cling to connections that do not serve you. Instead, you stand in your own power, knowing that you are enough with or without them.